Yeah. It is amazing. I mean, even back in the 30s, I remember there's this great quote by Trotsky, not that I would quote Trotsky for any other reason, but he would say, we live in a weird age where people fly in these tremendous machines and yet they have amulets to protect them. From we're kind of living in a very split way. We have all this technology. At the same time, not everyone is quite up with what that technology came from. Yeah.
I'm just curious if this is looking at evangelical Christians at the end of the creation, or if it also includes other clearly conservative groups.
Yeah, well, interestingly, one thing that we're increasingly seeing crop up in Europe, because we are not just the national, but we're the international Center for Science Education. There is a British Center for Science Education, too, although they spell center funny. But one thing that we're seeing, more so a European problem, is Islamic creationism. Because you could put Islamic creationism more on this end here with young earthers as well, and I think that would be fair to lump them in. There's a group in Turkey and a person named Harun Yahya, who is actually not his real name, it's sort of a pen name, puts out these elaborate full-color books, 500 pages with all these pictures of organisms. Oh, you have one? Okay, excellent. Yeah, they're really something else. They just sends these to like every library in the Britain, and all these professors, and they just dropped on your door this really expensive book. You're like, what the hell is this? It's Islamic young Earth creationism. But in America, two groups that are most prominent in this are the Institute for Creation Research, the ICR, and Answers in Genesis, AIG. Answers in Genesis is the group that also runs something you may have heard of, the Creation Museum in Kentucky. So this young Earth creationism group is something that you're going to be, as teachers, facing a lot of students thinking in. They may not even know what it's called, but they're probably not geocentrists. They're probably not flat earthers. They're probably coming from this young Earth perspective if they're having criticisms of evolution and saying that instead we should look, the 1:1 here refers to chapter 1, verse 1, we should look into the Bible for scientific evidence. Now the big points here with young Earth creationism are these two. That creation of organisms was special creation. Organisms were created by Yahweh directly. And evolution, therefore, goes against that idea. Evolution is contrary, as they see it, to this idea of special creation. So their interpretation of Genesis is quite literal. On this day, God created this, this, and that. And they say, and that's all we need to know. And this evolution thing is just far off. Another main point with these young Earth creationists is the idea of created kinds. Now this means kinds of animals. This is a phrase a word that we see in the King James Bible. Different kinds of animals were created. So one variant of young Earth creationism allows for a small amount of evolution. They might say, well, maybe dogs have evolved in a human lifespan because, frankly, you're a dog breeder. You can say, oh, I want the tail a little bit more like this, a couple generations. You're doing it. So they say maybe this, what they call microevolution, can happen. Maybe we can have evolution within kinds, but you can't make a dog turn into a cat. You can't make a cat turn into a turtle. And it's that sort of phrasing that actually one of the members of the Texas School Board likes to use. He'll have scientists will come up to testify and will say, have you ever seen a dog cat? He means that seriously. Have you ever seen like a cat turning into a dog? Well, then evolution isn't true, if you haven't seen that. This is one of the members of the most powerful school boards in the country. So this idea of young Earth creationism has these 2 points at the forefront. Special creation and created kinds. Now one of the main people who promoted this, starting in the 60s into the 70s, especially, was a person named Henry Morris. He tried to pioneer what could be termed creation science. Talk about an oxymoron. Creation science is the idea that although we're going to keep using the Bible as a primary source of evidence, we want to also bring in some of the legitimacy of science without being bound by its requirements for evidence, without being, you can kind of see that in this phrase here. This is a quote from Henry Morris. It says, "The Word of God must take first priority." And secondly, the observed facts of science. So although you might do something that's mimicking science, if the results seem to contradict what you already know in the first priority, then they are ignored, then they are secondary. So this isn't what anybody would really understand as the process of science. But it lends the credibility of science. It puts on a white lab coat, in a sense. It says, oh yes, we're creationists, but we're also scientists. We look for the scientific evidence for creation. Now, Henry Morris wrote a couple of books. This was a best-selling one here called Scientific Creationism. Again, quite an oxymoron. And a nice cover, and a lot of what you as teachers will face in the young earth creationist realm comes from this. This book is full of all sorts of claims. Claims that radiometric dating of rocks is flawed, and that geologists know this, and they're hiding it. Claims that this evolution in kinds is the way that things have happened. It's really just all full of all sorts of specific detail that I see. Oops, yeah, seltzer water. That I see again and again. Yes.
I was just going to say, has there been or any thought of doing one of those books where you have on the left side like a page from this text, and then so it's a nice.
Well, actually, it's probably not. It hasn't been done in that format, but it's probably not that necessary. There's a site that I'll talk about in a moment here called Talk Origins, which basically goes over every claim in this book and others and shows why it is, what's the word I'm looking for? Wrong. Henry Morris, for instance, brings up things. I'm a geologist, so for me this is near and dear. He'll say these radiometric dating techniques. Scientists took a lava flow from Hawaii that they know the date that it flowed on, and they sampled it, and it comes up with 1 billion years, when in fact it's only 100 years old. But you go and read the paper, and it says, oh yeah, there's all these inclusions of this deep mantle stuff in this flow, and that's going to be contaminant, and so you should really watch out about sampling this sort of flow with these contaminants because it will give you the wrong number. So he's taking a legitimate scientific paper, but skewing it as if to say that creationism is overturning science. Public school edition. It's a little tiny print there, but let that sink in for a moment. This is meant to be put into public schools. But as I was saying, this was happening during the 60s. A series of court rulings have not been favorable to that idea. So now, young earth creationists. Well, now, think about it. It's logically consistent. If all kinds were created at once, if all things were created on the same day and humans were created last, well, after all, doesn't the fossil record show plants and fishes and then going to more complex things and humans kind of last in the fossil record? That's how God created them. And that's the way they phrase that.
Clothes too.
Say it again?
Clothes too. Yeah, clothing.
Well, you don't want to be naked. That would be obscene. Actually, at this creation museum, they have a very interesting thing with Eve sort of strategically having her hair go over her, like, really? Because, the Garden of Eden, one is supposed to be nude. Exactly, so just strategic hair. So they did that very cleverly. Yeah. So this is a diorama from the Creation Museum. These animatronic animals, dinosaurs will move and growl, but they won't bite because, of course, there was no predation in the Garden of Eden. Yeah.
Where is the Creation Museum?
It is in Kentucky. I'm forgetting the exact. It's not too far from Cincinnati. This is a book by the son of Henry Morris, named John Morris, called Tracking Those Incredible Dinosaurs and the People Who Knew Them. And the people who knew them. That's the important part. And here we see dinosaur tracks and human footprints intersecting. They really think that dinosaurs and humans lived together at the same time, until, in fact, quite recently. In fact, many of them hypothesize maybe there still are dinosaurs deep in the Congo, deep in the Amazon. They could still be there. And here we see what would be the perfect evidence of footprints, a human footprint and a dinosaur footprint stamping over it. It doesn't look fake to me at all, does it? No, totally. Every time you step in the mud, it looks exactly like that, yeah. Now, the Answers in Genesis group is actually doing something interesting, too. They are building a second park. The Creation Museum has been such a financial success for them. They're now going out and expanding. They're building a full-scale Noah's Ark. They're interestingly doing this with public money from Kentucky. The governor is saying, well, this is going to create jobs. Granted, perhaps jobs at which you'll have to sign a statement of faith to work there. But nonetheless, they're going to create jobs. And so the citizens of Kentucky are financing this. So that's the young earth side. And that's a lot of what you're going to be facing. But there is a side of creation that also involves old earth. People who are creationists but think that, yeah, maybe the earth could be 1 million years old. Heck, some even say maybe 1 billion years old. Maybe even some would say they have no problem with a 4.5 billion year old earth. Evolution is wrong, of course. But the earth may be old. And we can think of these two grouped together as being kind of a branch of this we can call intelligent design, which is something I'm sure you've heard of. Intelligent design has proponents, it's kind of a big tent thing. It has proponents who accept an old earth, has proponents who accept a young earth, and most importantly, though, together they reject evolution. So they say, first we defeat Darwinism, then we'll fight among ourselves for about the age of the earth.
But there's a realm of intelligent design that believes in the process of evolution. It just was created originally by some.
Yes, and that's why I put it in this position in the continuum. We're gradually moving more and more towards evolution on this end. Some of the old earth creationists, some of the...
What's that? That's a sperm.
No.
Bacterial flagella.
Yeah.
Flagella, yeah.
Right. This is a video of the bacterial flagellum, which is one thing the intelligent design proponents love to point to. They say this is a rotary motor, in a sense. It's like an outboard motor. And it has all these parts. And if you were to take away any one of these parts, the whole thing would cease to function. Therefore, how could Darwinian evolution have created it when each part added to this gradual process conferred no benefit? They sort of don't really know the biology that this comes from other structures that do have a benefit. It's only slightly modified into this. But it's an argument that people such as Michael Behe, a proponent of intelligent design, have made and has probably been very effective in turning people towards this idea of intelligent design. They also like to point to the eye and say, it's more complicated than a camera. It's got all these different parts. How could this have evolved step by step? Well, of course, science knows exactly how this evolved step by step. It's a kind of a no-brainer. But they can use it as a powerful argument. People who don't know any better, kids in your classes, parents of teachers you may have, are going to be hearing the eye disproves evolution. They're going to be hearing the bacterial flagellum disproves evolution, or at least some aspects of evolution. The guy who's the main proponent of this, Michael Behe, he can accept a lot of evolution. He's even written that he can accept some ideas of common descent. But certain structures, like the eye, like the bacterial flagellum, have to have been specially, supernaturally created. And that, in a nutshell, is intelligent design. Now, one of the main groups promoting intelligent design is a group called the Discovery Institute. And this is an older graphic from them, but I think it, pictures 1,000 words, really expresses this idea. Here we see the old guy, Yahweh, reaching out, and instead of touching Adam's finger, as in Michelangelo's painting, touches DNA. So processes of evolution happening through DNA, but DNA itself being specially created. Just as the young earth creationists would say, special creation created everything. Now, as we're moving closer towards evolution, we come to something we could describe as theistic evolution. This is an idea that evolution is real. Evolution is happening. Theistic evolutionists really fully accept evolution as real science. But they also see a place for God. They also see a place for religion. You can think of prominent scientists such as Francis Collins. He's the current head of the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, a very prestigious scientist. And he's also involved in a group called the BioLogos Foundation, which promotes this idea. He is a very well-respected scientist. He's also a person of faith. So he is promoting an idea that you could describe as theistic evolution. Real evolution, but with some component in our lives, at least, perhaps involving the soul of religion. Simon Conway Morse, one of the most well-respected paleontologists in the world, a guy who really did defining work on the Burgess Shale, also very much a person of faith. So he is someone who doesn't feel that he needs to give up his faith in order to talk about science. And as we move further on this end, we might get to what we could describe as a materialist or a naturalist point of view. And at this point, we have full acceptance of evolution, but no religion. And a proponent of this you might think of as Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins is, of course, a great promoter of evolution in science. He's also well known as a very prominent atheist, and has said things such as, in describing the universe that we see around us, we can detect no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. Oh, it's a little grim. Now, y'all know anybody who's like a recent college grad, looking for a job? You might just pass them a Dawkins book, or you might just take them aside and say, "Son, I'll give you a word of advice. Take you outside there." And the person looks up expectantly and says, "Plastics?" No, not plastics. Blind, pitiless indifference, son. That's what the world has for you. Sorry, you should have had the foresight to be born a generation before. Anyway, so this idea of no design, no purpose, no evil, we can think of this as an opposite end here. And Richard Dawkins, of course, is one person who very much promotes this idea. So this continuum, and the point of me going over this, is that creationists will try and promote the idea that there's only this or this. That you have to be Richard Dawkins or you have to be Henry Morris. One or the other. And your students may hold those ideas. So it would behoove you to try and explain to them, well, actually, for people like Francis Collins, who are people of faith, they haven't had to give up their faith. And some creationists who believe in some creation also believe in some evolution. So let's talk about some of the questions you, as teachers, are going to be dealing with. Now, one site I mentioned earlier here is Talk Origins. TalkOrigins.org is your one-stop shop for every creationist argument and why it is wrong. And I highly recommend you spend some time on this. It's got a great compendium of information. You can also get it pretty easily through Google hits. If a student is bringing in some question about the bacterial flagellum and you type bacterial flagellum intelligent design, it's going to be one of the top hits on that. But I want to talk about 4 things here, 4 out of the 20,000 that are potentially facing you. 10 questions, a list of 10 questions that may come into your classroom. I want to talk about academic freedom bills, something called the Santorum Amendment. I say that in quotes because it's not really an amendment. And the Hatch Amendment. I have that not in quotes because it is really an amendment. But neither of these amendments say what students who are bringing them into your classroom think they mean. So first, with the 10 questions. These 10 questions derive from a Discovery Institute fellow named Jonathan Wells. Many years ago published a book called Icons of Evolution. The sense in icons that he means this is as religious icons, the kind of thing you in gilded print you'd put up on the wall. This icon of evolution is something those Darwinists hold as almost a religious idea. And he broke down the chapters in this book into 10 of these ideas, and then has this as a standalone single sheet. If you search for this 10 questions to ask your biology teacher, you'll come up with a lot of hits. PDFs of this all over the web. And parents who are encouraging their children to challenge their science teachers, in other words, to challenge you, may print these out for their kids and say, tomorrow you're going over that evolution chapter, right? Why don't you just bring this in? Just ask your teacher these questions. So this may be something you're directly facing. Well, has anyone actually faced it so far? No, okay. Yeah, you have. Really? Tell me about it.
Well, I don't know if I've gotten the actual sheet of 10 questions.
Yeah.
I'm almost positive I've gotten a few here and there.
Okay.
I teach out in Pleasanton, which is a pretty conservative, upper middle class neighborhood, suburban.
Yes.
We had a teacher there, an older teacher, that actually would sort of gloss over the evolution chapter. I've had plenty of kids, and with very, very intelligent kids, with very intelligent parents, come at me with these questions and send me links to, all these guys you're talking about. I go check out, links from your website and things like that, and I have my own links. And I send stuff back to them, and I'm like, well, you're welcome to your beliefs, and I don't go at them because I know that's risky for me.
Yeah, and that's a very good thing too. I mean, you got something you always keep in mind with this. In your classroom release, these are children.
Yeah.
Someone may have the wrong idea, but they're also like 14.
Yeah.
It's a-
But I really have to bite my tongue sometimes.
Yeah.
I feel very strong.
Indeed, it's a tough thing to do, but biting your tongue is and pointing them towards the right thing is perhaps the most one can do.
One interesting thing that generally works to my advantage is that a lot of the people that they cite, usually when I do a search on who these people are, they're in jail. Google research on this guy, and I kind of leave it at that.
Yeah, Ken Hovind, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. He'll be in jail for a few more years, I think. Yes.
I teach in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Mm.
Even there, I've encountered these kinds of questions.
Uh-huh.
And the first time that happened,
Mm.
where is this coming from? Because everything I said, they were seventh graders.
Yeah.
And I was talking about New England's prehistoric past, the first-hand news
Mhm.
revolution. So I said, yes, of course, we teach science here. The whole way through, they were challenging everything.
Yeah.
So I thought, where is this coming from? They were Boston Public School kids. And the teacher at the end said, because I thought maybe it was a religious thing, she said it's not family culture, it's not religion, it's the science teacher they have in Boston Public
Someone
Schools
in the schools itself.
who known that evolution is necessary.
Yeah.
But one thing, when you were looking at that continuum,
Mm.
and this is sort of a philosophical thing, and I think, we're Americans, we should be able to believe whatever we want religiously. But I think there's a tendency among scientific thinkers to say, well, this is ridiculous, and as you move on this tree, so to speak, that it gets more and more archaic. But as much as I think people should believe whatever they want, to me, it's like, once you introduce the supernatural, it's the supernatural, and it's only a matter of degrees. Like either you're vegetarian or you're not, and you might say,
Well, there's fish. Fish vegetarians.
So I'm not advocating that you preach one end or the other,
Hmm.
but I think that Richard Dawkins' argument really, I mean, I can see as a creationist that you could say it's one or the other.
Hmm. Richard Dawkins may have that polarizing effect, in fact, and he has such denigrating things towards people of faith, which I think of Simon Conway Morris. I mean, I really respect him, scientifically.
I think the thing is to try to divide religious belief from scientific evidence.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you're gonna, usually, for some people, it's really hard to try to mix it. Because it makes sense, one's supernatural and one is
Yeah. Yes.
I was just gonna talk about what you were mentioning here. There's a book by Stephen Jay Gould
Mhm.
that talks about how religion and science are two separate. He calls them magisterium, and so he's like they shouldn't really be arguing at all because they're really kind of two different things about life. And I'm blanking on the name of the book. Perhaps you know it.
Well, I know the.
Rock of Ages.
Yes, what?
It is Rock of Ages. It is Rock
It
of Ages.
is Rock of
Okay.
Ages. Yeah, I think that sounds right. Yeah.
Right, he calls it NOMA, non-overlapping magisteria.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would check it out.
Definitely.
And this, showing this continuum and discussing this continuum and, what the aspects are, I think is useful for us. But I would not, show this in my classroom, unless, as far as a science classroom, because
Right.
would want to keep beliefs and science really separate. And so these issues come up, and so I think it's really helpful for us to see, where these different ideas are coming from, and with the groups that are proposing this, and that's very helpful, so that we have that to go back to. But in terms of really, I also try to say, this is not about this is science, and to really teach science and be respectful of people's beliefs as a matter of faith and that sort of thing.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, in a science classroom, when do you have time to talk about anything else?
Right. But it is useful for us.
Yeah, I hope so. Yes.
I find the Nature of Science,
Oops.
your website, and the focus on the nature of science to be the absolute savior. This debate, it's not a debate, and I
Yeah.
really agree with that we're in a science class, it's just not even like, it's just not an issue. We talk about science things, and science is one tool. Religion and faith and belief, that's another whole arena that is valuable and important in its own right. And I think to say, oh my God, I can't believe that they think this way, it's so horrifying, is disrespectful.
Yeah.
And it's much easier and gentler, and I think more powerful to take it from, well, we're just not in the same ballpark. That's over here in this field, this is the science field, and this is what we're talking about here, which is respectful. And I think you'd have more of a chance of, oh yeah, we can see that they can coexist. We can have both of them, no matter what our personal views are. I think that's a really
Exactly. It's something I found useful in this regard is the idea of testability. So you can test scientific ideas. You can have controls on the scientific ideas. You can have blind observers, double blinds in scientific ideas. But when you take your religious idea, like say one of the 5 pillars of Islam is that one should make a Hajj, a pilgrimage to Mecca. What's the scientific test on that? I mean, it's not something that is applicable. So this idea of non-overlapping magisteria has a lot of interesting ideas to it. Yes?
Well, I get questions from my students too, or I have with the last year. I haven't gotten any parent responses yet, but myself and the other science teachers decided that we were going to do what we want. So when they were like, the Earth is 2,000 years old, we're just saying, no, you're wrong. That's it. We're just saying, like, no, you're misinformed. I don't know who told you, but it's not true. You know, so we just started like really, like.
Well, now you know who told him, Henry Morris.
You know, and like, we get the same questions about like global climate change. Oh, it's not happening. It is. Like we're just being
Yeah.
really like forcefully blunt with them to say, you know, like we have evidence. Whoever told you that does not have evidence. Yes. Therefore.
And what's the response been to that?
Some of the students say, well, I choose to believe it anyways.
Yeah.
Some of them say, well, I want to see the evidence. And so we show them, and that's kind of just like how we've adopted it. We've been like really like united and like strong that we're gonna like fight these. We have quite a few religious students.
Right.
It's mostly religious.
Yeah, I mean, something that I worry about from the pedagogical point of view. You come at somebody bluntly, like that, and people have a defensive reaction. And when you come in attacking them, they're going to maybe retrench a little bit more. There's this great paper published last year that was showing that in regards to political, Nyhan and Riffler, 2010. These 2 political scientists showed that in regards to political issues, when people were entrenched in a position, the more evidence you showed them, the more entrenched they became. So, maybe an idea is to introduce the idea of evolution without calling it the E word. That's certainly one strategy. Well, how about this? Do you look like your parents? A little bit. Yeah, you got the same nose. You got the widow's peak hair. Did your grandfather have that? Did your great-grandfather? And sort of introduce the ideas of lineage as maybe a way to gently put it in, rather than just saying, you are an idiot, which is sort of... This fellow has basically said that of religion, and that's very polarizing. They love to quote Richard Dawkins, not on this, but on this. If you're a person of faith, it's very sort of used by the creationist side.
All right. Going back to the continuum chart and picking up on what you were just saying, I have an old acquaintance of more than 40 years who has moved from the unearthed creationist to theistic evolution. So there are people out there who will consider the evidence, and I think those are the people that we should really be concentrating on. The people who have, rigid beliefs that will never change, just say, okay, I hear what you're saying, and let it go at that. But concentrate on the people who will think a little bit about things, who will entertain some evidence, and some of them may shift.
Yeah.
Yeah, just along those lines is that, for me, it's not about being blunt and challenging. I try for my students to bring down the wall. So not only doing the whole, like, religion and faith is one world and science is another, and you don't use them to test each other, but I try and bring it to something a little bit more immediate in their own experience in school, and saying, are we going to do a scientific experiment to test your understanding of a piece of literature or something like that? So it's kind of like you don't cross the fields where you have different ways to understand it.
Yeah, imagine that test. Hamlet, sane or insane? What is the answer?